A mother walks into a courtroom. She opens her purse, and she empties a gun into the man who killed her daughter. 7 seconds, 6 bullets, one verdict she refused to wait for. Lübeck District Court, Room 157, West Germany, March 6, 1981. 10 a.m. Day 3 of trial. A cold, rainy Friday morning. The kind of day you forget easily. Germany never forgot this one. Klaus Grabowski was led in through a side door and sat down, back facing the entrance. Marianne Bachmeier walked in, glanced at the room, and turned as if to leave. The Ted K. archive. Then she changed her mind. She pulled a Beretta 70 from her purse, fired 7 times. 6 shots hit Grabowski. He was killed almost instantly. Wikipedia. This wasn't a movie. This was a mother. She allegedly lowered the gun and said, "He killed my daughter. I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I shot him in the back. I hope he's dead." All that's interesting. Why that morning? Because Marianne had heard Grabowski plan to testify, and she feared another lie about her dead child. U.P. During her own trial, she wrote a handwriting sample that read, "I did it for you, Anna," then drew 7 hearts, 1 for each year of her daughter's life. All that's interesting. She was convicted of manslaughter, sentenced to 6 years, released after 3. Wikipedia. But here's what haunts every legal scholar since. In a 1995 television appearance, Bachmeier admitted she shot Grabowski after careful consideration. A former friend also confirmed she had rehearsed the shooting in a basement after Anna's murder. Wikipedia premeditated, or pure grief. She died of pancreatic cancer on September 17, 1996, age 46, and was buried beside Anna in Bergtor Cemetery, Lübeck. Wikipedia. 2 names, 1 grave. A story that justice still can't fully explain. Let me search for key facts for each case to make these scripts accurate and powerful. Now I have enough facts for all 13 chapters. Let me write them all. "16th Street Baptist Church, Birmingham, Alabama, September 15, 1963, 10:22 a.m., a Sunday morning. 4 little girls are getting dressed in a church basement. They're fixing their Sunday best, talking about school, laughing. Then the world ends. Denise McNair, 11. Addie Mae Collins, 14. Carol Robertson, 14. Cynthia Wesley, 14. Killed almost instantly when 19 sticks of dynamite detonated beneath the steps of the 16th Street Baptist Church. This wasn't random. Birmingham had been called Bombingham. Homemade bombs targeting black homes and churches were so common, the city had earned that nickname before this morning. Sarah Collins, 12 years old and Addie Mae's little sister, was in the same room. The last thing she remembered was Denise asking Addie to tie her belt. And then it happened. Sarah lost an eye in the blast. The KKK didn't just kill 4 children, they killed them at church, on Sunday, in their best clothes, while their parents sat upstairs. It was later revealed that the FBI had identified the bombers by 1965 and did nothing. The first suspect wasn't prosecuted until 1977, 14 years later. Martin Luther King sent a telegram to Governor George Wallace. "The blood of our little children is on your hands." The FBI knew, the governor enabled, and 4 girls never came home. Justice delayed. 4 times over. IRT number 2, Express Train, Lower Manhattan, New York City, December 22, 1984. Saturday afternoon. A mild-mannered electronics engineer boards a subway. 3 days before Christmas. 60 seconds later, 4 people are bleeding on the floor. Bernhard Goertz, 37, shot 4 black teenagers after they allegedly tried to rob him. All 4 survived, though one, Darrell Caby, was left paralyzed and suffered permanent brain damage. The first shot hit Troy Canty in the chest, the second hit Barry Allen in the back, the third tore through James Ramseur's arm and lodged in his side. The fourth missed Darrell Caby. Then Goetz walked over to Caby, cowering, unhurt, and said something that still chills people today. "You seem to be all right. Here's another." He fired a fifth shot point blank, severing Caby's spinal cord. Goetz jumped onto the tracks and vanished into the darkness of the subway tunnel. He surrendered 9 days later in Concord, New Hampshire, admitting on tape he'd been carrying an illegal handgun for 3 years, ever since a mugging in 1981. New York erupted in support. Newspapers called him a folk hero. The NYPD tip line flooded with people cheering him on. He was acquitted of attempted murder, served just 8 months for illegal weapons possession. Then, in 1996, a civil jury awarded Caby $43 million. Goetz declared bankruptcy. 1 man, 5 bullets. An entire city forced to look in the mirror. Was New York cheering justice, or just cheering their own rage? Medellin, Colombia, January to December, 1993. Pablo Escobar terrorized an entire country for a decade, blew up planes, assassinated presidential candidates, declared war on the Colombian government itself, so his enemies declared war right back. Los Pepes, Los Perseguidos por Pablo Escobar, was a paramilitary group built entirely from Escobar's enemies. Led by the Castaño brothers and financed by the rival Cali cartel, they waged a brutal campaign through 1993 that ended only when Escobar died. They didn't just go after Escobar. They hunted down accountants, drivers, top sicarios, and lawyers representing the cartel. Bodies turned up with signs reading, "For working for the drug terrorist and baby killer, Pablo Escobar. For Colombia, Los Pepes." But here's where history gets dark. In February 1993, the CIA complained that Colombian government forces were sharing real-time intelligence with Los Pepes, who used that information to carry out waves of bombings against Escobar's assets. The US government, officially, was horrified. Unofficially, the CIA and the US government helped Los Pepes track Escobar by relying on Castaño's own intelligence network. Castaño even opened an office in Medellin where informants walked in off the street. On December 2, 1993, Escobar was cornered on a rooftop in the Los Olivos barrio and shot dead. Bullets to the leg, torso, and through the ear. Justice? Or just a better-funded cartel taking over? The war on drugs outsourced its dirtiest work, and then pretended it didn't know. San Francisco, California, 1851 and 1856. Imagine a city of 25,000 people with no real police, no real courts, no real law, just gold, greed, and guns. That was San Francisco in 1851. The gold rush had exploded the population overnight, and crime ran completely unchecked. Robberies, murders, arsons, no consequences. So the merchants and businessmen of the city made a decision. We'll be the law ourselves. The San Francisco Committee of Vigilance formed in 1851, and within weeks they were hanging men. No trial, no jury, no appeal. Just a rope and a verdict by committee. They flogged some, deported others. They called it order. By 1856 they'd dissolved, but chaos returned. So they came back. 6,000 strong this time. This time they hanged a sitting politician. They exiled political opponents from the city entirely. 6,000 armed men deciding who gets to live in your city. And the cliffhanger that history quietly buried. One of the Vigilance Committee's own senior members was later exposed as deeply corrupt, using the committee's power to eliminate his personal business rivals, not just criminals. The men who built the scaffold also built their own fortunes on it. Vigilante justice is only clean until you look at who's holding the rope. Bannack and Virginia City, Montana Territory, 1863 to 1864. The most dangerous man in a frontier town wore a badge. Henry Plummer was elected sheriff of Bannack, Montana Territory in 1863. By day, lawman. By night, the undisputed leader of a gang of road agents called the Innocents, responsible for over 100 robberies and more than 20 murders on the mining trails. When gold miners finally uncovered the truth, they didn't go to the law. They were the law, and he was their enemy. The Montana Vigilantes formed in December 1863. Within 6 weeks, they had hanged 21 men, including Plummer himself, who reportedly begged for mercy on the gallows, asking to be given a good drop. He was not. Swift, brutal, effective at first. But then the hangings continued, and the evidence grew thinner. Historians later documented innocent men executed on nothing more than grudges and rumors. No records were kept, no appeals existed. And then there's the code they left behind, scratched on notes, stamped on doors. The warning to suspected criminals: 3-7-77, 3 feet wide, 7 feet deep, 77 inches long. A grave's dimensions, a death threat, a message. Over 150 years later, the Montana Highway Patrol still carries the numbers on their badges, and nobody, to this day, knows exactly what they originally meant. Lincoln County, New Mexico, Sitka Territory, February to July 18. It started as a business dispute. It ended with the entire U.S. Army being called in. Lincoln County, New Mexico, 1878. 2 merchant factions controlled everything: land, credit, government contracts, and, most critically, the sheriff. When English rancher John Tunstall dared to compete against the Dolan-Murphy monopoly, they had him murdered in cold blood on a public road. His employees formed the Regulators, a counter-posse operating with a legal warrant but very personal motivation. One of them was a 19-year-old drifter named William Bonney. History would call him Billy the Kid. The Regulators ambushed Sheriff William Brady, the man who'd enabled Tunstall's murder, and killed him in the streets of Lincoln. Then came a 5-day siege at the McSween House in July 1878, with the building set ablaze. 3 Regulators died. McSween was shot dead trying to escape the flames. Federal troops finally ended the war. Governor Lew Wallace offered Billy a pardon if he testified against other killers, and Billy did. He testified. He cooperated. Then Wallace never honored the deal. Billy returned to his guns, was eventually hunted down and killed by Sheriff Pat Garrett in 1881. The pardon letter existed. The governor chose to ignore it. Billy the Kid trusted the government exactly once. They proved him right to never trust it again. Tombstone, Arizona, Territory, March to April 1882. The gunfight at the OK Corral was the beginning, not the end. On March 18, 1882, 6 months after Tombstone, Morgan Earp was shot dead while playing pool at Hatch's Saloon. The bullet came through a glass door. He was 30 years old. His brother Wyatt watched him die on that billiard table. The next day, Wyatt Earp became something else entirely. He assembled a federal posse, technically deputized, effectively an assassination squad. With Doc Holliday, Warren Earp, and a handful of others, he rode through Arizona on what history calls the Vendetta Ride. In 3 weeks, 4 cowboys connected to Morgan's murder were dead. Florentino Cruz, killed at Iron Springs. Curly Bill Brocious, allegedly killed at Iron Springs in the same ambush. Johnny Barnes, wounded, died later. Frank Stilwell, shot in Tucson, his body riddled with bullets. Wyatt fled to Colorado. Arizona issued a warrant for his arrest. He was never prosecuted. He lived to age 80, died in Los Angeles in 1929, told his story to journalists who turned him into an American legend. But here's what keeps historians arguing to this day. Did Curly Bill actually die at Iron Springs? Or did Wyatt fabricate the kill to justify fleeing Arizona? No body was ever officially confirmed. America built a myth on a man who may have invented his greatest moment. Candelaria Church, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, July the 23rd, 1993, 12:30 a.m. 8 children, sleeping on the steps of a church, shot dead in the night. The Candelaria massacre was carried out in the early hours of July the 23rd, 1993, when gunmen opened fire on homeless street children sleeping outside the Candelaria Church in central Rio de Janeiro. 8 were killed. Several were shot in the head while sleeping. The killers were off-duty police officers. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was policy. Rio's death squads, formed from off-duty and retired cops, had been running extermination campaigns since the 1950s. Their stated mission: clean up crime. Their actual practice: murdering poor children, favela residents, and anyone who inconvenienced the powerful. Hundreds of extrajudicial killings every year. Near total impunity. Courts that looked the other way. The Candelaria killers were eventually convicted, a rare victory. Then, years later, those convictions were quietly overturned. And the squads didn't disappear. They evolved. They became the militias, organized criminal syndicates made up of current and former security forces that today control large portions of Rio's favela territories. They charge residents for protection. They run the gas, the internet, the transport. The death squads didn't end. They got business cards. Justice won one trial, then lost it, and the men with badges kept the guns. Taney County, Missouri, 1885 to 1889. They started with a real problem. They became the problem. Taney County, Missouri, 1885. Post-Civil War lawlessness had completely hollowed out the local justice system. Murders went unpunished. Horse thieves operated openly. Courts were corrupt. So Civil War veteran Nathaniel Kinney organized a night rider network, masked men on horseback who would do what the law wouldn't. They called themselves the Bald Knobbers, named for the bare hilltops where they held their secret meetings. At first it worked. Criminals fled the county. Genuine order returned. But power corrupts, even righteous power. Within 2 years, the Bald Knobbers had moved from pursuing murderers to terrorizing men for drinking, for adultery, for personal grudges. Families were flogged in their yards. Men were dragged from their homes in the night. When 2 men were murdered in their beds, targets of a Bald Knobber faction acting on private vendettas, the state of Missouri finally intervened. Multiple members were tried for murder. 2 were hanged. The organization collapsed by the late 1880s. But the real cliffhanger: evidence emerged that local officials had secretly authorized the Bald Knobbers from the beginning, then publicly condemned them the moment things got embarrassing. The government lit the fuse, then blamed the explosion on everyone else. Aba and Onitsha, Anambra, and Abia States, Nigeria. 1998 to 2002, the trial lasts 3 minutes. The execution is immediate. No lawyers, no appeal, no record. Nigeria, 1998. Crime had consumed the southeast. Armed robbers terrorized markets in broad daylight. Police were either absent, corrupt, or complicit. So the market traders of Aba took justice into their own hands, with machetes and a reputation for the supernatural. The Bakassi boys claimed their blades could detect guilt. Suspects were brought before them, the blade was applied, and if you were guilty, you bled and died on the spot. If innocent, supposedly, the blade passed harmlessly. This is not metaphor. This is what thousands of Nigerians believed and witnessed. And it worked, in the sense that crime plummeted wherever they operated. The fear was total and immediate. Then the Nigerian government made a catastrophic decision. State governors formally funded and endorsed the Bakassi boys, making them an official instrument of state power. That's when everything broke. Personal grudges became executions. Business rivals were tried and killed. Entire families targeted based on fabricated accusations. When Nigeria formally disbanded them in 2002, splinter factions persisted for years. And the most haunting fact of all, because no records were kept, no trials were transcribed, no names were logged, we will never know how many innocent people they killed. Gone, erased, as if they never existed. El Salvador. San Salvador and surrounding regions 1994 to present the Civil War ended. The killing didn't. El Salvador, 1994. 12 years of brutal civil conflict had just officially concluded. But the country had inherited something worse than war. A power vacuum, shattered institutions, and tens of thousands of demobilized fighters who knew nothing but violence. Into that vacuum came the gangs. MS-13, Barrio 18. Many of them deported from the United States, hardened by American prison systems, and dropped back into a country with no infrastructure to absorb them. And then, someone started leaving notes on bodies. Sombra Negra, the Black Shadow. Death squad execution-style killings, targeting gang members, mostly. Warning notes left on corpses. The message was unmistakable. The state won't clean this up, so we will. The Salvadoran government officially denied the group's existence. International human rights investigators documented the killings. The fingerprints of active and former security forces were everywhere in the evidence. But here's what made Sombra Negra something far more troubling than a simple anti-gang vigilante group. Several of their victims had zero confirmed gang connections. Workers, petty criminals, young men who looked wrong, lived in the wrong neighborhood, were seen with the wrong person. In a country still traumatized by a civil war in which death squads killed 75,000 people, they just built new ones with different politics and the same machismo. Michoacán State, Mexico, February 24, 2013. The farmers picked up the guns themselves. February 24, 2013. The Mexican state of Michoacán. In town after town, ordinary civilians, lime farmers, avocado growers, teachers, rose up against the Knights Templar cartel that had held the region hostage for years. The Knights Templar didn't just deal drugs, they extorted everything, taxed every lime, kidnapped daughters, murdered anyone who resisted. And the Mexican government watched, or participated. So the people formed the Autodefensas Comunitarias. Within hours of the first uprising, entire towns were liberated. Within months, 20,000 armed civilians were operating across Michoacán, rolling back cartel territory town by town. Their leader, Dr. José Mireles, a small-town physician, became an international symbol. CNN, BBC, 60 Minutes. The doctor who raised an army. But the cartels are patient. They infiltrated, they bribed, they replaced. Slowly, faction by faction, the autodefensas were corrupted from within. Cartel money replacing farmer solidarity. The movement that liberated Michoacán became indistinguishable from the force it had fought. Dr. Mireles was arrested in 2014 on weapons charges in what most observers called a political takedown. He was finally acquitted in 2018, by which time many of his own former factions were openly working for the cartels. He won. The movement lost. 20,000 people rose up with their bare hands against evil. And evil simply waited, then walked through the front door. Baton Rouge Metropolitan Airport, Louisiana, March the 16th, 1984, 9:30 p.m. He's standing at a payphone. Baseball cap. Sunglasses. Back turned to the crowd. He's talking to his best friend. And then he whispers, "Here he comes. You're about to hear a shot." Jeff Doucet, Gary Plauchet's 11-year-old son, Jody's karate instructor, stepped off the plane in handcuffs, escorted by sheriff's deputies. News cameras were already rolling. Gary reached into his boot, pulled a revolver, whirled around, and fired a bullet into Doucet's head from 3 feet away. 3 seconds. Broadcast nationally. The most shocking footage on American television that year. Doucet had been manipulating and harming Jody for over a year before kidnapping him, taking him on a bus to California, dyeing the boy's hair to avoid detection, and assaulting him repeatedly in an Anaheim motel. When deputies pinned Gary against the payphones and asked, "Why, Gary, why?" he said, "If somebody did it to your kid, you'd do it too." The judge gave him a 7-year suspended sentence, 5 years probation, 300 hours community service, which he completed at his local church, mostly cutting grass. He never spent a night in prison. Hundreds of letters flooded the courthouse. Almost all said the same thing. Don't punish him. But here's the human truth that gets lost in the heroism. Jody, the boy Gary acted for, was angry at his father. Because he'd told no one about the abuse, terrified his father would do exactly what he did. "I knew he wasn't kidding," Jody said years later. "That's why I couldn't tell anybody, and that's exactly what he ended up doing." Gary died in 2014. Jody became a child safety awareness advocate and called his father the greatest dad of all time. 1 shot, 3 seconds, a love so fierce it broke every law, and still somehow healed. Every single person in these stories believed, completely, absolutely, without doubt, that they were right. And maybe some of them were. But here's the question that should keep you awake tonight. If everyone gets to decide when the system has failed enough to justify their own justice, who decides when to stop? The line between justice and revenge doesn't break dramatically. It erodes, quietly, slowly, one righteous decision at a time. So ask yourself honestly, where is your line? Because history shows us that line moves every single time.